Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Kayla Bryson. I would like to give a special thank you to the Autism and Black team for having me join this year's conference and getting to share my discussion with you all. Today, I will be speaking on paraprofessional and student relationships in education. First, to share about myself, I was born and raised in California, growing up in the Fresno area, a town 30 minutes south called Visalia. After graduating high school, I moved to Sacramento to attend college and is where I still reside for the last 10 years. I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in sport and performance psychology. I have been a paraprofessional in the K through 12 system for 5 years. I've previously worked with students in special education at the elementary, middle, and currently at the high school level. I am a high school varsity head girls basketball coach in Northern Sacramento. I just finished up my 7th year coaching this past winter. Finally, I am a business owner with K&B Sport Performance. I provide youth athletes and performers with mental skills training and performance enhancement services. The goals and objectives of today's discussion are going to be understanding the role of paraprofessionals and instructional aides in the classroom, learning the collaborative relationship amongst the education team, and advocacy for multiculturalism and independent living skills for individuals on the autism spectrum. Some definitions I want you all to be aware of that I'll be using in today's discussion. Para, meaning a paraprofessional or a paraeducator. An IA, an instructional aide or assistant. AT is assistive technology. AAC is augmented and alternative communication. Gen Ed is general education or neurotypical students. Some classroom classifications starting from mild to severe. RSP being Resource Specialist Program. SDC, Special Day Class. And lastly, ILS for independent living skills. So our first topic that I'll be discussing today is the role of paras and IAs. So giving some insight into the daily tasks of my school site, which is a part of Western Placer Unified School District in Lincoln, California. And my individual role is an ILS high school class, which is moderate to severe diagnosis, including autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome, physical disabilities, and intellectual disabilities. I am a one-on-one para who is supervised and assisted under a credentialed teacher, and I also assist with instruction and lesson planning. With over 15 students in our ILS class, we are actually split into 2 classes where our kids will alternate every other day in these classrooms. I as well attend gen ed classes such as PE and elective classes with students. and assist wherever necessary based on their behavioral and physical needs. We as well implement any behavioral and academic goals based on the IEP or the BIP or Behavior Intervention Plan. And we as well will support any hygiene, feeding, or toileting needs. As some of our students cannot complete these tasks independently, so that's where my role as a para would come in to be able to assist with these as needed. Next, I'd like to share on behavioral supports and modification. So the science and research behind the position I have is applied behavior analysis, or ABA, which observes and evaluates behavior, and we apply interventions to meet the goals, either making these specific behaviors occur more frequently or less frequently. An example of a basic intervention is actually ABC data, which identifies the antecedent, so whatever happened before, the behavior, what was the behavior during the incident, and the consequence, what occurred after the behavior surrounding this situation. So this data is used to describe functions or the reason behind behavior, and it often leads to situations such as access to something. They want to escape or avoid a task or a place. They want to receive attention, or they want to be stimulated through some sort of sensory need. Next, I'd like to move on describing visual and text support. So sometimes teaching and instructing often requires extra assistance. And so items that I have used in the past in my work include core boards, which are used with nonverbal students to express and communicate their wants and needs. So using these squares and simple expressions, they can point to what they're needing in that particular moment. Also timers, these help students know the amount of time they have left for an activity and helps prepare them for transition throughout the day, going from task to task. Next is visual schedules. So these let students know what to expect during their day and to know if any changes are going to be expected throughout their routine. The next item is a token chart. This is used as reinforcement for students to earn their preferred activities, or as well for a break while completing a non-preferred task. So each of the little smaller minions that you see there, we would add one when they've completed a positive behavior. And as they get the 5 total that they need, then we can list and say, okay, what are they working towards? What are they working for? So that helps them see their progress as they work toward a task. The next item is an adaptive switch. So this is another resource for nonverbal students. They can share their requests and wants and needs, and these can be preset and customized by school staff. So when the student goes to hit the button, they know what phrase is being said, and that's their way of communicating their want and need. And the last resource I would like to share is a app system called Snap Type Pro. This allows students to complete worksheets or drawing and typing on a keyboard of a tablet or a computer instead of writing with a pencil, a pen, or a marker. So you would simply take a photo of the worksheet and you upload it into the app, and they can click and type their responses and answers. And if you would like a printed copy or some sort of other copy of this, there is a way of emailing it and printing it in either a PDF or a Word document format. So moving on now, I'd like to transition into discussing the details regarding the education team. Service providers are individuals who either work on campus or come into the campus a few days a week, and they give additional supports to our students based on the physical and academic needs. The amount of days and times a week these students get to work with these service providers is determined by their IEPs and BIPs. So some of these include our speech pathologist. So this is working on speech and language with both peers and adults and teaching functional communication. Adaptive PE. So this is an individual that comes out to the PE classes and helps teach ways for physical activity and ways that can be adaptive to no matter the physical ability of the students. We have vision specialists. So they work closely with our students with vision impairments, and they provide other resources and adaptive items within the classroom to help the students succeed. An occupational therapist. So they work with the more functional things during the day. So some things are personal OT has worked with our students on is tying their shoes, zipping up jackets, washing hands. For students that may be more advanced, typing on a computer, sending emails. So the more functional academic based items during the day. And our last service provider is a physical therapist. So this is more for the physically impaired students. We do work with some students that are wheelchair bound. So this physical therapist will often come in to help them be more mobile throughout the day. So eventually they don't have to be in a wheelchair as frequently during the day, 24/7. Going more in depth into when the IEP and BIP are, I know I've mentioned those a little bit earlier in this presentation, but an individualized education plan and behavior intervention plans they outline the academic, behavioral, and physical goals that are needed or expected of students to achieve each school year. These goals are determined by the special education teacher, parents and guardians, service providers, paras or IAs, and any other additional education team staff. Once these goals are created, it's honestly dependent on the paras to be able to implement these on a daily basis. Our teachers are not always with the students. So since we are more often with them during the day, they will often take our feedback and adjust these goals as necessary. And once these goals are set, then it's up to the parents or guardians to be able to approve these. So then us as a staff can then implement them during the day. So in order to meet the particular goals for the IEP and the BIP, curriculum sometimes has to be modified. Um, Typically, this will take place in the gen ed classes. So this would often be PE classes or elective classes, such as art, music, drama, photography, dance, or even yearbook and leadership. Modifications sometimes have to get creative depending on the subject. But some common ones include modeling. So this would be doing the task that we expect the student to complete first, and then having them do it or them taking a turn completing the task. Trial training, which is smaller incremental steps. So we will often break down a task one step at a time, praising, rewarding, reinforcing each step that is completed to the level that we expect to see out of them. And then another common modification is hand over hand. So with writing tasks, if students can't do this independently, then we will often, the adult has their hand over the student's hand and is guiding them physically through the writing task. Now that I've given some insight into what working with autistic students is on a daily basis, I'd like to discuss some research addressing multiculturalism of autistic students in special education and how we can best promote independent living skills for life post high school for students. In the United States, popularity or prevalence of autism spectrum disorder has increased since the 1990s. In 1992, 1 in 150 children were diagnosed with ASD, in comparison to 2012, where we saw 1 in 36 children were diagnosed. Overall numbers have increased, as well as the racial differences amongst children with ASD. It was more prevalent in white children in the 1990s, but now we're seeing more prevalence among the Black, Hispanic, and Asian and Pacific Islander populations. Previous studies have shown that the variables for ASD in the US include primary spoken language, insurance status, parental educational attainment, and neighborhood wealth. These variables are often driven by racial disparities in access to ASD screening, diagnosis, treatment, and healthcare resources. And more specifically, we will sometimes see discrimination from healthcare providers, which then creates a cultural stigma. Then there may be income disparities and differences in citizenship status, and a shortage of multilingual clinicians. Within this specific research, there was a review of 406 Medicaid eligible students in Philadelphia in 2007 and found that Black children with autism spectrum disorder were 2.6 times more likely to be misdiagnosed, 5.1 times more likely to be diagnosed with adjustment disorder, and 2.46% times more likely to be diagnosed with conduct disorder before the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis was given. So we're often seeing that children of color are getting misdiagnosed, then this causes them to not get the resources and treatment that they need to be successful in school. There are persistent racial differences for ASD in the US for children born after 2010. The passing of the Affordable Care Act in 2010 led to changes in health insurance coverage that plays a role in these numbers. Rates of insurance coverage for all racial and ethnic groups have increased after the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, while the racial disparities in insurance coverage have decreased. An additional contributor to the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder for minority groups in the US is the younger age of diagnosis, increased education and wealth, and it's possible that healthcare providers may be disproportionately overdiagnosing autism spectrum disorder in Black and Hispanic children in an effort to improve access to healthcare. So this could falsely be happening and finding ways to make these numbers accurate as possible. And knowing a little bit more about these numbers in relation to the racial and ethnic makeup of autism spectrum disorder, students in special education, specifically their relationship between race and the special education placement depends on their disability category. Children of color are at a greater risk of special education placement than white children when they exhibit behavioral challenges or what could be labeled as behavioral challenges. And white children have a greater risk than children of color when they exhibit academic challenges. Determining a disability in special education placement comes from teacher referrals, a psychoeducational testing and the interpretation of that testing, and the team meeting for eligibility criteria. These can cause biases, preferences, political affiliations, and other individual factors that shape how students are seen as having a disability. And looking at this more critically, research in Wisconsin was taken during the 2010-2011 school year, and it looked out at how race intersects with states' construction of disability categories in schools and how the categories are sorted. It's noted that Wisconsin is a state with a wide range of racial composition in its schools and has a large racial inequality in education and special education. Over 400,000 students and over 2,200 schools were included in this research. With this, they used 3 disability categories. The first one being higher status, which included other health impairment, which was often the label for ADHD, speech and language impairment, and autism spectrum disorder was included in this. The second disability category was emotional disturbance and intellectual disability. And the final disability category was labeled as stratified status. This was labeled as specific learning disability. I want you to note that autism spectrum disorder was categorized as a higher status disability, which is often associated with lower stigma and more advantageous services than other categories. However, for Black and Native American students, they were 2 times as likely as white students to receive special education services under any disability category. And autism spectrum disorder for white students had them receive a special education placement at a higher rate than Black students. The findings concluded in this study that students of color who struggle in school are more often put into a lower status disability, which leads them to be excluded from their general education classes, segregates them with lower performing peers, and adds a stigmatizing label to them. A possible contributor to this is teacher racial bias. Due to the teacher referral being one of the factors that determines disability in a special education placement, a teacher who has a more negative perception of a student of color may not adequately support the children of color, preventing disability identification, and may also advocate for services under a lower status disability category. Since the study took place, though, in 2016, the Obama administration issued the Equity in Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and it requires, quote, a common standard for identifying significant disproportionality in representation of students within special education, end quote. And also requires school districts to address disproportionately the under or over identification. Even this was an attempt to oversimplify the problem, but the findings suggest that the relationship between race and special education placement varies a lot by category of disability and the composition of school ethnic population. Considering the multicultural and racial disparities for autistic youth, the last topic I would like to share today is what life may look like after high school by promoting independent living skills. For adolescent age youth, ages 12 to 18 years old, independence can look very different based on the individual's development and their level of need. As educators, parents, and advocates, it's important to encourage students who are autistic to find their strengths, talents, and interests and use those to maintain practice and repetition while we gradually remove the support as they make progress. With the spectrum of development, some individuals are going to need lifelong intensive care. They're going to need caretakers and conservatorships, while others can complete daily tasks with periodic check-ins. Their lives may allow them to be employed. They may be able to live on their own away from home and be enrolled in school. But knowing the development will widely range, working with particular individuals to discover how they best need to be supported and find their personal version of what independence is going to look like for them. To wrap up my presentation today, I would like to share a free resource with all of you called Open Access 2.0. They're an organization based here in California that helps schools and students have access to curriculum in any grade level, no matter the environment. So using the link here, you can view resources using the UDL model for both AT and AAC devices. So when you click the drop-down menu here for accessible technology, and you click on the AT Resource Flip Kit listed here, and then you scroll down to select a strand. They have a variety of options relating to subjects and interest here. But as an example, using the writing and composing, then it provides me with the type of resource. So there's additional resources here. So if we just click on organizing and composing, then for the type of resource, however, from what is shown here, there's an abundance of resources down here, including the Snap Type Pro resource that I listed. So you are more than welcome to browse this on your free time. But it's a great opportunity to get more resources for classrooms, school sites, clinics, and even for personal use at home for students. These are my references and research articles that I mentioned in my presentation. And lastly, here's my contact info for anybody that may have any questions or would like to reach out. Email is the best way of contacting me, or you can message me through social media as well. Um, Thank you for you all to get the opportunity to see this, and I hope you learned some valuable information about my discussion today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.